The gavel slammed like a gunshot, echoing through the tense courtroom. A sharp crack of finality. Michael Carter didn't flinch. He just sat there, hands cuffed, face still, eyes staring forward like they were watching something miles away. Behind him, his mother Janelle let out a sharp gasp, almost a scream, and then dropped to her knees. Her hands clutched her chest as if trying to hold her heart in place. A bailiff rushed toward her shouting, but his voice drowned in the rising wave of voices. Journalists raised cameras. Someone sobbed. Someone else cursed. The judge adjusted his glasses like he hadn't just sentenced a 17-year-old to die behind bars. Flashbulbs exploded. In that chaos, Michael whispered to no one in particular, this wasn't justice. This was revenge. The chaos moved in slow motion around him. He looked pale, detached, not angry, just empty. As the bailiff led him away, chains clinking softly, Janelle's scream cracked through the air like lightning, tearing through silence. The room trembled, but the judge stood still. Order was never restored. Only silence followed. Michael Carter sat in the holding cell beneath the courthouse, his wrists still red from the cuffs. A flickering overhead light buzzed above him, the only sound in the stale, concrete box. The walls, painted a sickly yellow, were cracked and peeling. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at the wall. The air smelled of rust and cold sweat. He remembered his mother's scream. It rang in his head louder than the judge's sentence. He mouthed her name once. Just once. Then, silence. The guard paced beyond the bars, indifferent. Michael was no longer a boy. In just minutes, the world had rewritten him as a criminal. A murderer. The door behind him creaked open, and he didn't turn. He knew no one was coming for him. Not now. The cameras above blinked red, but there were no eyes behind them. Just machines. Just silence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like vultures. Microphones stretched forward. Do you believe the verdict was fair? Did you know your son was involved? Janelle pushed through the mob, her face streaked with tears, her legs trembling with each step. She couldn't speak. Her throat burned from screaming, but her eyes said everything. Rage, disbelief, grief. A woman reporter touched her arm gently, but Janelle recoiled like she'd been slapped. He didn't do this, she finally choked. My son didn't kill anyone. Flash. Flash. Another camera clicked. And yet, the headlines were already being written. Mother of convicted teen collapses. No one was interested in truth, just spectacle. Inside a news van parked nearby, a young journalist reviewed the footage. Frame by frame. Michael's face. The scream. The silence. She paused at the exact moment his lips moved, rewinding, then slowing it again. This wasn't justice, he had said. This was revenge. She whispered it aloud, stunned. Her editor's voice came through the radio. We're going with the angle. Violent teen, broken home. That plays better. She looked back at the screen. Michael didn't look violent. He looked broken. She hesitated, finger hovering over the send key, but she pressed it anyway. The headline was already written. Michael was placed in a prison van, shackled to the bench by his ankles and wrists. The cold steel burned through his clothes. Across from him, another boy, older, tattooed, already defeated, stared at nothing. The van rumbled to life. Through the narrow grate, Michael saw his mother running, barefoot now, screaming his name. A guard closed the door before she could reach it. She slammed her fists on the metal as the van pulled away. Michael didn't look back. He closed his eyes. The sound of her sobs trailed behind the van, swallowed by sirens and engine noise. The city didn't stop. The world didn't care. Before the courtroom, before the cuffs, Michael Carter lived quietly in a modest apartment on the east side. It wasn't much. Cracked linoleum floors, chipped paint, a fridge that groaned louder than the TV. But it was home. His room was neat, stacked with textbooks and soccer trophies. College brochures lined his desk, corners worn from flipping. At night, he studied with earbuds in, nodding to beats while solving equations. Janelle watched him from the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, her tired eyes filled with pride. She didn't have much, but she gave him everything. When he'd come home late from the diner, she'd have a plate waiting. "You're gonna get out of here," she'd whisper. "You're gonna rise, Michael." He'd smile, sheepish, and say, "Yeah, Ma, I know." She believed in him so fully, it made the weight on his shoulders feel lighter. The quiet hum of their life felt eternal. But even peace has an expiration date. Janelle worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices by day, nursing homes by night. Her feet always hurt, her back always sore, but she never showed it to Michael. She'd smile through the pain, slap a warm meal on the table, and ask about his school day like she wasn't on the edge of collapsing. When he came home from late shifts at the diner, she'd be half asleep on the couch, the TV casting a soft glow over her face. "You eat?" she'd mumble. "There's a plate for you." And there always was. She saved every dollar she could in a coffee tin behind the cereal. "College," she said. "A better life." And he was on his way, top of his class, never missed a shift, letters from colleges beginning to trickle in. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And when Janelle looked at him, she didn't see a statistic. She saw a future. And Michael saw hope in her eyes. It was supposed to be a simple party. A friend from school. A house in the hills. Music, lights, too many people packed into too little space. Michael almost didn't go. He had a shift at the diner, but his friend Deshawn convinced him. "Just a couple hours, man. You need to breathe sometimes." Michael agreed, reluctantly. He remembered the moment he stepped inside. Flashing lights, loud music, and a heat that clung to the walls. Someone shoved a red cup in his hand. He didn't drink it. He stuck close to Deshawn, laughing, watching the crowd. Then came the shouting. A fight near the back hallway. Someone pushed, someone swung. A bottle shattered. Then came the silence. Then the scream. Michael didn't run. He stood frozen. And when the police came, he was still there. That would be the only fact that mattered to them. The aftermath was chaos. Blue and red lights danced across the driveway. Kids scattered like ants. Michael was still inside, hands raised, standing over Deshawn's crumpled body. Blood on the floor. Sirens closing in. An officer grabbed him hard, shoved him to the ground. "Stay down." He didn't resist. He didn't even speak. Deshawn's eyes were still open, staring at the ceiling. The EMTs were too late. Another boy dead. Another life shattered. Michael was cuffed and led outside as cameras already clicked from across the street. A neighbor had filmed the whole thing, but only the arrest, not the moments before. His silence was used against him. "If you were innocent," they asked, "why didn't you run?" Michael had no answer. He hadn't even thought about running. He only thought of his mother. And how she would see him now. The trial was quick. Too quick. The public defender barely looked at Michael. The prosecution painted him as violent, impulsive, dangerous. Never mind his grades, his job, his future. "Wrong place, wrong time," they said. But the jury didn't care. They saw a black boy at a crime scene. They saw silence as guilt. Janelle sat every day in that courtroom, holding her breath, gripping prayer beads in her hand so tightly her fingers bled. The witness testimonies were shaky, the evidence thin. But the outcome had already been decided. When the verdict was read, no one looked at Janelle. No one acknowledged her scream. And Michael? He just stared at the floor, like he'd seen it all coming long before anyone else. In less than 4 weeks, a life was erased. A future rewritten. Justice had no interest in waiting. 2 weeks after the verdict, Janelle stood outside the house where the party took place. It looked ordinary, cheap siding, overgrown grass, faded balloons still tied to the porch rail. She stared at it like it might confess something. She crossed the caution tape, ignoring the whispers of neighbors watching from behind blinds. The living room was cold and hollow. No music, no laughter, just the ghost of that night. She found an earring under the couch. Blood dried into the carpet. She knelt, pressed her hand to the floor. "What happened here?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. The police report said it was all documented. It wasn't. There were no photographs, no video, just written testimony, just words. But the truth wasn't in words. It was in what had been erased. And Janelle could feel it, that sense that something had been buried, deliberately, cruelly. Janelle started tracking down the kids who had been at the party. Most didn't answer her calls. Some flat out hung up. She showed up at doorsteps, at gas stations, outside schools. They avoided her, mumbled lies, offered half-truths. "I wasn't there that night. I didn't see anything. Just leave it alone, okay?" But one boy, a quiet senior named Evan, looked at her too long before walking away. She followed him to his car. "You know something," she said, eyes locking on his. He didn't answer, but his silence cracked the air between them. "He didn't do it," she whispered. "You know he didn't." Evan looked down at his hands, then back up. "I can't help you," he said. "They told me not to talk." "Who?" Janelle asked. But he just started the engine and drove away. It was Elena who finally spoke. She was young, maybe 16, nervous, biting her nails, glancing over her shoulder constantly. Janelle met her at a bus stop, invited her to sit. They talked in fragments, in whispers. "Michael didn't kill Deshawn," she said. "I was there. I saw it." Janelle's breath caught. "Who did?" Elena looked down at her lap. "I can't say. I can't." Janelle leaned closer. "You don't have to say it out loud, just not if I'm close." She began listing names, one by one. On the third name, Elena flinched. Janelle knew. "Michael saw it too, didn't he?" Elena nodded, eyes wide with fear. "He saw, but he was scared. Are you scared?" Janelle asked gently. Elena answered with silence. Then she whispered, "They're watching me." And then the bus came. 2 days later, Elena was gone. Janelle called her phone, disconnected. Visited her apartment, empty. Neighbors claimed they hadn't seen her. Her school said she'd been withdrawn. No explanation. Just gone. Janelle filed a report, but no one followed up. "Kids run away all the time," the officer said, dismissive. But Janelle knew better. Fear had a scent, and Elena had been drenched in it. Something had scared her into silence, or worse. Janelle stared at her photo on her cracked phone screen. She didn't know the girl well, but she knew what she represented. Truth. Proof. Well, a voice no one wanted heard. And now that voice had vanished. Janelle tucked the phone back into her coat and whispered, "I won't let them erase you." Janelle turned to the media. She called every station, emailed every reporter. She told them about the missing witness, the flimsy evidence, the silence in court. No one listened. "It's not news," one said. "Not anymore." Another advised her to move on. Even her own pastor gently urged her to let it rest. "You need peace, Janelle." But peace didn't live here anymore. She printed flyers. Stood outside the courthouse. Held up her son's photo, her hands trembling from exhaustion, her voice cracking from overuse. Passers-by avoided her eyes. A mother crying out for justice wasn't rare enough to matter. It was just part of the noise. But to her, it was everything. She would scream until someone heard, even if her voice broke, even if it broke her. Janelle changed. The woman who once wore bright scarves and laughed at old sitcoms stopped speaking to anyone unless it was about Michael's case. The laughter disappeared first, then the music, then the color from her clothes. Her eyes were tired, her voice hollow. Friends stopped calling. Mine. Church members kept their distance. "She's obsessed," they whispered. But obsession was survival. She stopped answering the door. Curtains stayed drawn. Her apartment became a war room, walls covered in sticky notes, maps, names. A red string connected them all. She didn't eat much. Slept even less. Every hour not spent working was spent digging. Alone, ignored, dismissed. But she didn't care anymore. They had taken her son. They weren't taking the truth. She spoke aloud to the walls sometimes, just to hear her voice. "You're still in there, baby," she'd whisper. "Mama's coming." Michael's letters began to change. In the beginning, they were hopeful. Updates about GED classes, stories about cellmates, poems he wrote. But they grew darker. Each envelope felt heavier than the last. "The lights go out early here," one said. "But the screams don't stop." He wrote about a boy who hanged himself. About another who was stabbed over a deck of cards. "It's not the violence that scares me," he wrote. "It's the silence that follows it." His words became sharp, desperate. He asked fewer questions and made more confessions. "I dream of walking out, but I forget where the door is." Janelle read them all under the same flickering bulb, hands shaking. She replied to every letter. Encouraging words. Prayers. But she wondered if he even received them, or if they just floated, unopened, like messages in a bottle in a sea of indifference. Some nights, Janelle sat with Michael's yearbooks. She flipped through them slowly, running her fingers over his photos, the one in 6th grade with the crooked smile, the freshman portrait where he wore a tie too big for his neck. She remembered the science fair he won, the birthday when he baked her a cake from scratch. She kept the trophies on the shelf, dusting them every Saturday. The world had moved on, but she hadn't. The boy they locked away was still frozen in her memory, bright-eyed, driven, gentle. She whispered to the photo frames, "They don't know you, but I do." Grief doesn't leave. It lingers, slowly transforming into something heavier, something sharper. Love twisted into determination. Memory into fuel. Every smile in those photos was a reason to keep going. The call came just after midnight. A voice, raspy, low, almost mechanical. "You're right. The tape exists." Janelle sat upright, her heart pounding. "What tape?" she asked, gripping the phone. "The one from across the street. They never entered it into evidence. Who are you?" Silence. Then, follow the camera. Click. Dot. The line went dead. Janelle sat there frozen, replaying the voice in her head. She jumped from bed, threw on a coat, and dug out the original case files. There, on the last page of the police report, a small mention. Security camera mounted on a business across from the house. No usable footage collected. She read that line 5 times. Then circled it. Then underlined it. Then whispered, "Lies." The truth was never lost. It was hidden. Janelle stood outside the convenience store across from the party house, staring up at the security camera mounted just under the awning. It was old, slightly rusted, but intact. The owner, a man named Ray, remembered the night well. "Police took the footage," he said. Said it was nothing useful. Janelle asked if he'd kept any backups. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I keep a drive, just in case." He disappeared into the back. Minutes passed. Then he returned, holding an old hard drive in shaking hands. "I never watched it," he said. "Didn't want to know." Janelle took it with both hands like it was sacred. Thank you," she whispered. Ray didn't reply. As she walked away, heart pounding, she realized, for the first time in months, she had something real. Something undeniable. A piece of the truth. And now, she had to survive what came next. The old drive clicked and whirred, ancient and stubborn. Janelle sat at her kitchen table with an ancient laptop she borrowed from a neighbor. She opened the files, hundreds of hours of footage. She scrubbed through, her eyes dry from hours of staring. Then, At 11:43 p.m. on the night of the party, the grainy footage showed it. Blurry shapes. Movement. A figure stumbling out of the house. Another following. A confrontation in the driveway. Not Michael. Taller, bulkier, diatoyu. A face partially visible in the streetlight. Michael stepped out moments later, his hands up, his posture uncertain, passive. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but it showed enough. He wasn't involved. He witnessed something. Someone else had done it. And now she had proof. Janelle leaned back, tears welling. For the first time, she wasn't just screaming into the void. She had something they couldn't ignore. She brought the footage to Reggie, Michael's childhood friend now working at a small tech shop. He transferred the file, enhanced the lighting, and slowed it down frame by frame. They watched in silence. "That's not Michael," Reggie said, pointing to the aggressor. "Nope," Janelle whispered. "That's the Diaz nephew." Reggie froze. "You sure?" She nodded. She remembered him from the trial, smug in the gallery, whispering with the prosecutor. And then he was gone. Never questioned. Never accused. "They covered it," Reggie muttered. "They buried this." The air thickened. "Can you pull a clean still?" Janelle asked. He nodded. She leaned over his shoulder, her eyes burning. "I'm going to make them look. I don't care who tries to stop me." She dug deeper. School records, social media, news clippings. The Diaz nephew, Jameson Brooks. Arrested once as a teen, record sealed. Moved out of state after the trial. Changed his name. Started over. But Janelle found him, working at a car dealership in Arizona, under a different last name. She stared at his staff photo online. Same eyes. Same smirk. She printed it, taped it beside the still from the video. "He was there," she whispered. "He did it." Her hands trembled as she pulled out Michael's court transcript. Not once was Jameson's name mentioned. The Da had erased his own nephew to save his career. Janelle's rage turned cold. Calculated. Not. They had sacrificed her son for convenience. And now she had everything she needed to light the match. Janelle stormed into the public defender's office unannounced. Files under her arm, eyes blazing. He barely looked up. "Mrs. Carter, I told you." "Look at this," she snapped, throwing the photo on his desk. He paused, then frowned. "Where did you get this?" "Don't worry about that. Worry about your conscience." She dropped the hard drive beside it. "The footage was never submitted. Your team missed it. Or ignored it." He looked pale. "This isn't admissible. It's real. And you know it." She leaned in close. "You're going to help me fix this. Or I swear, I will burn every inch of this city's justice system down before I let my son rot for someone else's crime." The silence in the room was heavy, electric. The lawyer stared at the photo, then slowly, reluctantly, reached for the phone. The lawyer made a few calls. Then someone else did. And soon, quiet rumors became roaring questions. Was evidence withheld? Why wasn't the footage shown in court? Who is the boy in the video? Whispers spread fast, through legal offices, newsrooms, online forums. A local journalist picked up the story, then another. Janelle sat by the radio, hearing her son's name again, but this time, not as a headline of guilt, but as a victim of injustice. The truth had a pulse now. People were paying attention. The system that once ignored her was starting to tremble. She didn't celebrate. Not yet. The mountain still stood in front of her. But for the first time, it had begun to crack. And Janelle? She was just getting started. Janelle walked back into the same courthouse that had stolen her son, but this time, she didn't walk in broken. She walked in armed, with evidence, with names, with truth. She clutched the folder tight to her chest as she climbed the marble steps, each one echoing louder than the last. Inside, she marched past bailiffs and secretaries who once pitied her. Now, they moved aside. She requested a meeting with the judge. "Reopening a case requires substantial grounds," the clerk said. Janelle opened the folder. Photos, timestamps, the enhanced footage, everything. The clerk stared. Wait here. Janelle didn't sit. She stood tall in the center of the room, defiant. She wasn't asking any more. She was demanding. And behind her fury was every night she sat alone, every ignored letter, every silent scream. Now, it was their turn to listen. The district attorney refused to meet with her. Chain of command, his assistant said. It's out of his hands now. But Janelle didn't back down. She went to the press conference, waited until the cameras were live, then stepped forward. Your office buried evidence, she said. Your nephew was at the scene. Gasps echoed. The Da's eyes twitched. That's not true, he barked, flustered. But the reporters circled in, hungry for more. Janelle handed one of them a flash drive. Watch it, she said. The Da tried to dismiss her, called her a grieving mother, emotional, confused. But it didn't work this time. Her voice was clear. Her words cut like a blade. You didn't just fail my son, you sacrificed him. And then she walked off the stage, leaving the flash drive behind like a grenade, waiting to go off. That night, it happened. A leak. Anonymous documents appeared online. Internal memos, sealed reports, emails between prosecutors. The footage had been reviewed before the trial. They knew Jameson was present. They'd redacted his name. They'd claimed no footage existed, while actively covering it up. The city buzzed. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags trended. Commentators debated. How could this happen? Is the justice system rigged? And in the middle of the digital storm, Janelle sat alone in her kitchen, watching the truth spread like wildfire. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from validation. For once, she wasn't screaming into a void. She had made the world look. And the world was seeing it, finally, clearly, painfully. A new hearing was ordered. Michael was escorted back into a courtroom. This time, with cameras, with reporters, with truth. He looked older, leaner, eyes shadowed from years behind bars. But when he saw Janelle seated in the front row, he straightened his back. The footage was played. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Murmurs filled the room as the judge leaned forward, squinting at the screen. And this was never submitted? The judge asked. No, Your Honor, the defense said. The Da, now cornered, remained silent. Outside, people protested. Inside, the truth laid bare what no one wanted to admit. They got it wrong. Michael sat still, as stone. But inside something flickered. A spark, a breath, a beginning. He was being seen. When the judge asked if Michael wanted to speak, he stood. The room went quiet. His voice was calm, but powerful. You took everything from me. My youth, my name, my freedom, and you sleep just fine. He looked straight at the Da, who refused to meet his eyes. I didn't speak back then because I thought silence meant survival, but silence nearly killed me. He paused and said, I'm still here. You failed me, but I'm still here. His words didn't spark applause. They sparked silence, a deep, guttural silence of a system cracking under its own weight. The judge didn't respond. He just looked down. And in that moment, Michael didn't need forgiveness. He didn't even need justice. He needed to be heard. And finally, he was. Michael Carter was released on a gray morning. No bands. No parade. Just the slow turn of the prison gate and the rattle of chains being removed for the last time. Janelle waited on the other side, arms wrapped tightly around herself. When he stepped out, they didn't run to each other. They walked slowly, carefully, as if testing reality. When they embraced, it wasn't cinematic. It was human. Shaky, malinged, fragile. He was taller now. She was thinner. Years had passed between them. Time had not been kind. But they held on. Reporters shouted questions, flashes fired. Michael didn't respond. He just closed his eyes, inhaled the cold air and whispered, "It smells like home, but it doesn't feel like it." Janelle didn't cry. She had no tears left, but she gripped his hand like a lifeline, and together, they walked away from the place that nearly buried them both. Inside the courtroom, applause erupted as the judge declared Michael's record vacated. But the sound barely reached him. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, eyes unfocused. Janelle wept beside him, silent tears of exhaustion and survival. Reporters flooded the hallway outside. Supporters cheered. A protester held up a sign, "Innocence isn't enough." But Michael felt none of it. He was free, yes, but freedom came late, and the cost had been high. He stood only when the bailiff gestured, and walked out slowly, avoiding eye contact. A girl clapped as he passed. He gave her a tired nod. That was all he had left to give. The courtroom doors closed behind him with a heavy echo. The kind that sounds like an ending. Or maybe a beginning. Later that afternoon, Michael stood before a simple headstone. The grave was quiet, overgrown, forgotten by everyone but him. Deshaun Brooks, it read. His best friend. The boy they said he killed. Michael knelt, placing a folded piece of paper at the base. "I should have said something sooner," he whispered. "I thought silence was safer." Wind stirred the trees, brushing leaves against the stone. "They wanted me to disappear. And I almost did." He looked up at the sky, eyes red. "But I'm still here. And I remember everything." He stayed a long while. Long enough for the sun to dip. When he finally stood, he didn't look back. Some pain never leaves. But some truth demands to be carried. That evening, Janelle and Michael sat together on the old couch, just like they used to, but it wasn't the same. The TV was on, volume low, playing a movie neither of them watched. Janelle reached over, took his hand. He looked down at it for a long time, then finally held it back. "I didn't break," he said quietly, "but I'm not the same." She nodded. "Neither am I." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. Of memory, of loss, of things they couldn't say. She laid her head on his shoulder. For a moment, he let her. Then quietly he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." "Never," she answered. "Not once." They didn't say anything more that night. They didn't need to. Not everything has to be spoken to be understood. Michael stood outside the courthouse one last time. Same building. Different day. A new trial was underway inside. Another black boy, barely 16, seated in cuffs. Michael watched through the glass doors. The boy's mother paced in the hall, her face worn, her hope fragile. Michael turned from the door and looked toward the camera. He didn't smile. He didn't rage. He simply said, "Justice isn't blind. It's just expensive." Then he walked away, hands in his pockets, the sun catching his face just long enough to show every scar time had etched. The door slammed behind him. A gavel echoed from somewhere inside. The frame held a beat longer, then cut to black. In the silence that followed, his words stayed. Not a scream. Not a whisper. A truth too plain to ignore.